أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى إترة الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وأجل فرجهم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We're looking at bringing it home Ashura, and here we're looking at the personalities that we have heard year in and year out when we hear the events of Ashura and what happened on that day, and we're looking at how we can bring it home, what we can learn from their lives in order to use them as role models and bringing it home into our homes, into our lives, into our characteristics, so that we become a little bit like them, so that we learn from them, inshallah. So today I'm looking at Abbas ibn Ali. We know that he was the son of Imam Ali alayhi salam and Fatima al-Baneen. We've already looked at the brothers of Abbas, Abdullah, Jafar and Uthman. So today we're actually looking at Hazrat Abbas himself, and the one lesson that we can learn, the main lesson I feel we learn from Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam, is the concept of total submission. Let's look at his life and see how we learn this. We know that Imam Ali alayhi salam married Fatima al-Baneen to give him sons who will be brave and valiant. And indeed, al-Baneen, the mother of sons, gave him 4 sons, the eldest of whom was Hazrat Abbas, who was 35 on the day of Ashura. So he was in his prime. He had been brought up knowing that he was supposed to fight and defend Imam Hussein alayhi salam and defend the religion of Islam. And when there was no one left on that day of Ashura, Abbas wanted to go and fight, but Imam Hussein alayhi salam refused. Now, that must have been really, really difficult. And it's managing your legitimate desires. If we think about it, Hazrat Abbas, from before he was born, Imam Ali alayhi salam had married his mother because he wanted brave and valiant sons. Allah gave him brave and valiant sons. Abbas was known to be a fighter. People were scared of him. The few times he had entered the battlefield, the enemy had run away, and yet he was refused to go and fight by Imam Hussein alayhi salam. So understanding that being brave is not necessarily just someone who can just go and fight, but being brave is to be able to manage our legitimate desires. It may be easy to manage our illegitimate desires, but it's very difficult to manage our legitimate desires in order to do what Allah wants us to do, in order to do what is best, in order to totally submit to the will of Allah. And that's what Hazrat Abbas did by not arguing with Imam Hussein alayhi salam. When Imam tells him to arrange for water for the children, Abbas immediately accepts. So it's that acceptance of what Allah wants without question, because Imam, being the hujjah of Allah, is when he says it is what Allah wants. Imam is masoom, he doesn't make a mistake. So again, it's recognizing that when my Imam comes and he tells me to do something, although I may think that I can serve him in a better way, or I think that this, my talents are in different ways, or I can do this or I can do that. It's about accepting without questioning. And that is really, really difficult. And when Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam reaches the water and he picks up some water and he remembers the thirst of Imam Hussein alayhi salam in his household, and he throws the water back from his cupped palm. There is the lesson of not just following our legitimate desires, but thinking it through. Why did Hazrat Abbas throw this water down? There's been so much discussion about this, where people haven't actually understood this, what Hazrat Abbas was doing here. We all have a nafs which guides us towards what our needs are. And we have a ruh, a soul, which is what Allah breathed into us, which is our connection to Allah. And when we can move past our body and allow the soul to take control, then the tiredness and the hunger and the thirst of the body does not have as huge an impact as it would when the body is in control. When the soul is in control, then the soul can push past that pain, that that those wants. The question arises. There's a few questions that arise. One is that if um, was it not wajib for Hazrat Abbas to drink because without the water he may have died? In this situation, no, because he knew that his death was not going to be out of thirst. It was going to be because he was going to be murdered by the army of Yazid. Lanatullahi alayh. It is important to recognize that yes, if it meant he was going to die, then he would have drunk. But that was not the case here. Another question that arises is that if he had drunk, would he have not been able to fight much better? Again, if it is my body that is in control, then yes. But if it is my soul in control, then it has moved past the pain that the body feels, and it is now being pushed, being motivated by the soul, being driven by the soul. And therefore, the thirst is secondary to what needs to be done. And the soul is so focused on what needs to be done that nothing else comes into play at all. So it really wouldn't have made much difference if he had drunk or not drunk, because his soul was so strong that it was leading him and allowing him to do what was required. And thirdly, the third thing to remember is the respect and the honor that is given to Imam Hussein and the household of the Holy Prophet, where how could Hazrat Abbas have drunk knowing that they were hungry? Hearing the ringing of the children's alatash, how could he have brought himself to drink? It would have been against all instinct. It would have been against his akhlaq. It would have been something that would not have been true to who he was. He had gone to get water for the children. How then could he himself drink, not knowing whether he would have been able to bring the water to the children or not? And in the end, he wasn't able to take the water back to the children. Imagine if he had died knowing that he had drunk, but the children didn't get the water. And also, there was a point at one point where you think to yourself that all the time we have this nafs that is constantly pulling us to our material body. And Hazrat Abbas showed that through total submission in what Allah wanted, through listening to what Imam wanted, he was able to overcome that voice within him, which was telling him to take care of his physical body. At that time, his physical body wasn't important. It was his soul that was important. At that time, his physical body was driven by his soul. And he knew that his death was imminent, that it was going to happen very, very soon. And so whether he drank water or not really would not have had much effect on him at all. So the bringing it home message from the life of and from the lesson of Hazrat Abbas is this concept of total submission, where we are managing our legitimate desires, accepting what Allah wants without question, even when we're allowed to do it, to put it aside, to look at the bigger picture, to look at what is more important, to look at where the growth is. So it's not necessarily just, we're not concentrating on the sin here, we're not concentrating on what is illegitimate, we're concentrating on what is allowed, what is legitimate, but looking at where the most growth is and following through with that and allowing our souls to drive our bodies rather than our bodies driving our soul. Inshallah, we pray that we are able to move a little bit towards this status of where our soul is getting stronger and stronger, so that they can actually then dictate to our body rather than our body dictating to our soul, inshallah. Please join me in our final talk on bringing it home, Ashura, tomorrow, inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.